So coded.
Hello. Oh, wow. That's an awesome drawing, whoever did that. I'd like that later. Cool. So my name is Igor. I work for a company called Adapar in Mountain View, and I'm here to talk to you about web frameworks and web applications. In particular, one called Ember.js, which is pretty awesome, and I really like it, and I just basically want to introduce you to it and show you why it's so awesome. So let's start with the fact it's a JavaScript framework, which, if you think about it, is pretty amazing. Seeing how far we've gone with the amount of technologies we have right now, with which we can build websites, from server-side technologies to JavaScript frameworks, there's so many of them. I found this image of a bunch of pictures, and there's so many different options. I mean, this is actually a really bad one because some of these aren't actually frameworks, but there are so many options right now to build your website with. You can use Ember, you can use Angular, you can just use jQuery, you could use Rails on the server side. There are so many options for different libraries, technologies, and frameworks with which you could build your web app. So how do you pick one? Well, there are many different techniques you could use. You would, for example, go to Wikipedia, and there's a Wikipedia article called Comparison of JavaScript Frameworks. And as you can see, you can just go and look up all the green dots, green fields, and see how many of them there are. And if you do that, you'll find something called Smart Client that I never heard of before, and that apparently has all the checkpoints because Wikipedia never lies, and they couldn't do it themselves, of course. Or you could see what's popular in the web world. For example, this is you could hang out on Hacker News and see what are the best frameworks out there. You could see, for example, there was a Erlang day on Hacker News, and so you could see, oh, Erlang seems like a fair choice for a framework. You could also try, for example, talking to people in your community. That usually works pretty well. I mean, for me, sometimes it doesn't. If I go visit my parents in Bosnia, and I get tied into talks about technology, it seems to me that there's this tiny little PHP land in the middle of Europe where the rest of it uses sensible frameworks. I couldn't resist that little bit. Or you could also use what's basically picking frameworks by authority, which is how I ended up using Ember.js, in which you show up at work, and then your boss tells you, we are using this, and then you say, OK, and then you end up using that framework. Or you could just listen to me and let me tell you which one you should use and why. And I think that's actually the best choice. So let's take a look at Ember then. Spoilers, I'm not telling you to use it. But when you're picking a framework, for me there are two key parts to it, or any technology, is what does it try to do, and how well does it do it. Because there are pretty amazing technologies out there that do pretty useless things, and there are pretty cool attempts that don't do much. And Ember, for me, in order to understand it properly, I'll try to answer these two questions for you. So to answer them, let's go to Google's and see what Ember does. So if you just go to Google and you say Ember.js, and go to the About page, that seems relevant. Wait for it to load over the conference Wi-Fi. It says it's a framework for creating ambitious web applications, which kind of makes sense. You can create ambitious web applications. If you're trying to do something really complex to the web, Ember seems like the choice to go. So if we go back to our application, to our presentation, we've answered the key part of what this tries to do. And how well does it do it? Well, if you listen to me, I'm telling you it does it pretty awesome. So that's pretty much it. Thanks. I guess I have 25 minutes left. Okay, so maybe then we can go into more Ember stuff. If you think about, so the key parts, what does it try to do, and how well does it do it, is when it says that it's a framework for creating ambitious web applications. If you look into this, there are actually two parts of this mission statement. There's the web part of it, and there's the ambitious applications part of it. And I'll try to address each of them separately in order to understand. I could have given like a tutorial and like given some live coding of Ember apps, but you can, because this is a hacking conference and we're all going to be spending 2 days here messing with different technologies and working with them, I just want to give you a bit of background and design intentions of Ember. So once you go to the web page and you try downloading it and messing with it, you kind of have a framework in your mind of how you would want to use it and what you would want to do with it. So the two key parts I think that really speak to Ember are the web and ambitious applications part. So let's start with the more fun one, with the web, because a lot of us are web developers, and I'm a web developer, and I think web is awesome. It's been it's more than 20 years that it existed, and the values it shares that are openness and sharing and the communities it created have been pretty amazing. And basically the web and the web technologies like HTML and JavaScript have won. But it hasn't always been clear that they would. But now when we talk about web, we don't think about images like these, when it's like a Java applet, or it's a Flash plugin that doesn't work at all, or on phones. We mostly think about web apps that are done with HTML and JavaScript. And a large part of it has been because JavaScript became much more useful, better. But I think a key reason why the web is important and why it won in the way it did is for this little tiny thing there that has existed for the last 20 years of web, the thing that says document URL, and the URL that it shows there. Because the URL, if you look at the history of apps, we seem to be going in circles of fat client apps, and then fat server apps, and then, you go into your terminal, and you log into a mainframe, and we seem to be going in circles. But we really did something here with this URL part. Because that's the key notion, the key part of the web that enables it to be the awesome force that it is, to basically enable all the sharing and connection and openness. The fact that you can take a URL and then message it to somebody, save it, bookmark it, and keep it for later is really the key part of the web. So we've had that for like 20 years. And then now 20 years later, let's see how well it works. So for example, if you go to Lufthansa website, and let's say I want to go back home, so I'll go, for example, from Hamburg to, for example, let's go to San Francisco. And let's pick a date. And I'm probably going to charge somebody for this travel, and I want to show them the tickets I want to do. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to search for a flight. And Lufthansa will process it. And it's going to take a while for that. Okay. So I have these tickets, and I have these options. And I'll say, for example, okay, this seems good. I'm not paying for it, so it doesn't really matter. So let's continue. Okay, I want this one. I find these options, and then I want to send it to my company and tell it, please book me this flight. And I take it, it's on the web. There are URLs. And if you actually copy this and paste it to a new browser, you'll see that basically, I don't think Safari has incognito. So yeah, so this gets you to, so you wanted to search for flights. While I already saw a flight, I saw what I wanted, selected the day, and this gets me back all the way to the search page. And it completely breaks the whole notion of a URL, that it's the app, it's the response to the state you're at the app, and you can share it with other people, and you can bookmark it. If I wanted to, this is a flight that I'm thinking about taking, I can click on the bookmark button and say, okay, I'll go back and revisit it later. And a large reason for that is because of the rise of JavaScript and complex Ajax apps, is because nowadays JavaScript apps basically build a whole lot, basically almost break the web and break the URL paradigm by adding a lot of code and keeping very little state in the URL. But for example, if you go to an Ember app, so a friend of mine runs an app that buys you can buy train tickets. Oops. I guess I can quickly sign up. Just a second, I didn't add this port on my laptop. So if we're trying to buy a plane ticket,
we have the same passport.
Or maybe we don't. This is very entertaining. Oops. Maybe we're not going to demo this. OK. OK, let's try signing up. Or not. Maybe it doesn't like to have multiple surnames. I really wanted to demo this. It's a really awesome app. Anyways, what you have seen is, what you would have seen is that if you picked a train ticket, it worked the exact opposite of Lufthansa. It basically, the URL as you went through it would have changed, and you could have emailed it around, which I totally should have done before. But anyways, the problem is that even though we have these amazing technologies in the browser, and we have JavaScript, a lot of people are really mad at people using JavaScript because they're breaking the web. And that's where Ember.js comes in. Because the key design decision in Ember.js, and what really drives it forward, is that it is URL-driven development. And what that means is that your app depends on URLs and depends on how, and stores state in the URLs. So I don't want to bore you too much with code, but let's build a tiny example and see how it works. So I can demo a little bit of code. And it's pretty straightforward. You create an app, you say Ember application create, you get an app, and then that tells Ember to take over your entire browser and control the app. So Ember is basically an almost typical MVC kind of framework that has models, views, controllers, and templates. And from there, you can kind of expect what we're going to do is we're going to have templates, controllers, and views. But the key part of Ember is that when you start building an app, and this really informs how you think about creating apps and how you think about creating content, is that you start with a router, and you talk about the routes. So let's say we're now building an app for this talk, and we want to say, oh, we want to have an about page that tells you a little bit about myself, and we want to also have a talk page. So we're going to first start thinking about what routes correspond to these pages. And let's say, for example, we start with about. So Ember automatically, we're telling it here, hey, router, we're going to have an about route. And then we create a handlebars template that has a ID. If I'm assuming a lot of people have seen handlebars, it's basically a templating language for JavaScript. And then we say hello there. And this gives us a web app that if you go to /about, is going to say hello. So basically, that gets us up to 1995, where if you went to URLs, they would render stuff. And then the thing, though, is that the really cool part about JavaScript is that now we can make this dynamic. And now we can tell Ember, for example, there's an about route, and there's a model for it. Because it's MVC, we need some data backing it. And let's say the model has a speaker name, and let it be me, Igor, because I'm building this after all. Shame for it to go to waste. So then all we do is we say, hey, there's a route about that returns some data. There's a speaker that's Igor, and then we put the speaker variable in the template. Now we have a speaker variable, and now whenever you render this, it's going to correspond to the name Igor. And we now get the first part of our app. And that's kind of cool. I mean, the cool part is that now, above all the model view controller template part, stands the router. And that really informs all the decision making and control in the app. And that has a couple of really nice properties. Is that there's a same project structure. If you ever go on your project and you're like, okay, it's my first day, or it's my 200th day, I want to do something. And there's tons of files, and there's a huge mess everywhere. With a structure like Embers, where you have a router that separates your components, and you have controllers and views that are all informed by in this one control part, it's very easy to see different parts of the app and to understand how they work and how they interact. And also the data flows, you're not going to have a random jQuery call somewhere that changes the URL and that comes out of nowhere. Data mostly flows one way. Data comes in from the router and gets passed on to controllers that get passed to templates. And that really informs the way you structure your app and makes it very easy for people to understand it. But there's something even cooler, is that here if you have multiple apps, multiple routes, for example. So let's say now we have like a about route at the top, and we have a talk route for the particular talk. Automatically, when you switch between routes, and for example, here we put two links. For example, from the speaker route, you can link to the talk. From the talk, you can link to the speaker. The app automatically is going to modify the URL, and basically the entire problem that we were talking about of the URL state not matching the app state completely disappears, because the way you approached your app and the way you built it is basically from the top down. You thought about how you structure your URLs and how the data flows and how different resources behave, and now you get that magical experience of the URLs. URLs are not something you tack onto at the end, where you're almost finished an app, and then your boss comes in and says, okay, so when I refresh the app, the state goes away. Please put something. And then if you're in Backbone, you go and made some hashs for the URL to kind of match state. With Ember, because of the way it's structured and designed, the URLs basically are something that you think up front, and you design your app to behave that way. And I think that's a very, very powerful way of thinking about designing web apps. So basically, if you use Ember, the web's not broken, as the app is URL aware, and then everything comes from the URL. So there's another cool example. I really hope this one's going to work. This course is like an open source forum app that's built in Ember. And even on any app, if you scroll down here, you can see that the URL, as you scroll between different parts of the between different posts, and especially if that the URL automatically changes. You see here? So basically, even though it's infinite scroll, that a lot of people really hate because you can't link to things, if you're building it with Ember, because the router here knows about different posts, if you now take this and and copy it, and then Command C, it links you to the exact post you were looking at. And this is not something that was super complex and that had to be tacked on and then added in order for it to be supported. This comes from the fact that the way that app is built and the way apps are built upon is URL driven. And the way when you're building, for example, a forum app, you're thinking about posts and comments. And then for each of these comments, you just give them a route and a URL, and they automatically sync up. So this is basically the one thing that, for me at least, takes Ember away from other frameworks, because it really informs the way you structure your apps. It doesn't break the web. So we've been talking about key parts of when you're choosing a framework, of what does the framework try to do and how well does it do it. And then we looked at some of what Ember actually does, and what does it try to do is basically let you build complex web apps in a way that doesn't completely break the web, and in a way that makes sense and is structured. And also, it does it pretty well. And I just want to spend some time showing you a couple of really, really cool examples of how well Ember helps you build apps. Because it's a framework for creating ambitious web apps. And with ambitious applications, if you work on a team of, for example, 10, 20 people that are all working on one app, and it's all in JavaScript, or it's in some other dynamic language, after a year or two, you pretty much want to quit, because it becomes very, very painful. Because usually you get growing pains, and the structure of your app changes, and it becomes very difficult to handle. So what I really like about Ember is, even though it has lots of features, it's not very magical. And even if you're on a large team, it's pretty easy to understand what is going on. And myself personally, I have a very complicated relationship with magic. Because you go and see a demo, for example, if I was here trying to make a simple tutorial about Ember, I could make a couple of minutes of maybe 10 lines that would spring up a whole app. And it's similar to, for example, frustrations with Rails, where you don't see much about what is going on in the app under it. And Ember is not like that. Ember is what I would like to call magic the good parts, where Ember where it's not magical, but it stays out of your way. It informs the design decisions, and it informs the structure of your app, but it stays out of your way and lets you build things. And for example, we even managed to build a Pac-Man game using Ember, which is an MVC framework you're meant to maybe make forums. We spent some time on a hackathon and built a Pac-Man game pretty easily, because what Ember does is it provides you with primitives that work really well together. And Ember has been around for a while. It's basically, the current code base is very new. It's about 2 years old, but it comes, a lot of core ideas come from Sprout Core, which is what Apple used to build Mobile Me and a couple of apps. So in all those years, they picked up a lot of really cool parts. And some of them I just want to show off is like data bindings and computed properties. If you even go to the Ember's website, you can see something pretty cool, is that with this little code and data bindings, which mean that the templates and your controllers, if you've seen before, here, for example, we have a template that says my name is the variable name, and we have an input here that says a value is name. So with all this little code, this automatically syncs up and binds. And this is now a common feature in frameworks like Knockout and Angular, but is one of the things that you get out of the box with Ember, and it actually works super well with other parts of the app as well. For example, my favorite feature and something that really helps you structure your app really well are computed properties. And they're pretty awesome. Here is a small example of, for example, we're building our app to show what the users, which people, who came to SoCoded, and who the users are. So let's say you had like a, for example, user controller or object that says welcome, that has a greeting, a name, and a location. And then you, for example, had a user Igor from Hamburg, and then you're trying to output, hey, Igor, welcome to Hamburg. And then you build that app, it works, it's awesome, and then you go on vacation. And then somebody comes back and says, you know what? If you only could modify the greeting based on what day it is. And because the way properties work in Ember, this greeting, even though it was a string, you can automatically change it to be a function. And it's going to work automatically. And it's going to bind to the correct property, and it just works. You basically just switch the greeting to be a function. It figures out whether it's saying good evening or welcome, and it works. And then the other part is also that it's even better is if somebody tells you, you know what, even though we had that function, how about now that we want to render different things based on the location? There's a very declarative way where you just basically say this property location, where you depend on different properties. And here, when you're saying a greeting, what you're saying basically is what greeting outputs depends on the value of location. And you went from having a simple string when your app was small to having a super complex dependency chain that auto-updates and binds to your template. So when you render this, it's going to automatically update when the location changes. And that's pretty amazing. It's an amazing declarative way to structure your app in which you have different properties that depend on each other. And instead of having a lot of crazy imperative code, which is super hard to understand and read, you have a simple chain of dependencies where different properties depend on each other and help you structure your app and read through it and understand it. And then though these are kind of the key parts of structuring your app, it comes with lots of out-of-the-box primitives that work really, really well together. So I don't know whether you're familiar with the promises have been becoming very, very popular in JavaScript. And all they mean is that, for example, a promise is something that you get back from a JSON. That's something that evaluates later. So for example, if you make a JSON request, you get back a promise, and the promise evaluates when you get the data back. So because before, we kind of cheated. When we were doing that about route, we said, hey, you have a value with a speaker, but that came back immediately, which is obviously not true when you're building a web app. So the way it works in real life more is basically with a lot of asynchronicity. And you get, for example, you need to make an AJAX request, has to come back. And you would even, in most apps, you would wrap this with promises. But Ember, most parts of it, accept them out of the box. So for example, here, you say, hey, get JSON, and it's going to go and make the AJAX request. And the value comes back, and it populates automatically in the models. But even more is that because the entire router and the entire structure of the app is familiar with promises, if you want to, for example, put a loading route, all you say is, hey, I want a loading route, and while this AJAX request is going forward and back, you can put a spinning wheel or basically a box or a timer that tells your user that the app is loading. And because basically the Ember is composed of lots of primitives that work really well together, you'll see this all over the place. I get, even now, super surprised when I'm trying to figure out how to do something that seems super complex. But because of the way that these simple primitives interact with each other, it's usually possible to do it very, very easily, or even just build upon it. So that's pretty much it. I didn't want to go too much into technical details. If you want to see me around later, I can help you get started. It's super simple. Ember just recently launched the version 1.0 that basically now there are amazing docs and examples. You can go download it. There's a starter kit. It's basically maybe 5 minutes from downloading it to trying it out. And you can see, I'm hoping that this presentation helps you a bit, that if you just start and build out your app from the router downwards and start structuring it, it's a super fast and simple way to build your app. That's pretty much it. Thanks.